Family secrets are like shadows that lengthen at twilight. The dimmer the light grows, the larger they become, devouring everything in their path. These words, whispered by my grandmother on her deathbed, haunt me now more than ever. Sitting in the sterile hospital corridor, I watch the fluorescent lights flicker weakly above my head, their incessant buzzing mixing with the steady beep of machines. The acrid smell of disinfectant catches in my throat, reviving memories I'd rather forget. My sister, Emily, lies unconscious in the room across from me, her pale face contrasting with the harshly white sheets. A mental breakdown, they told me. But I know the truth is far more complex, far darker. I close my eyes, letting the events of the past few weeks play out in my mind. How did we end up here? How did my once united family shatter into pieces in such a short time? It all began with a phone call. My Aunt Rebecca's shrill voice echoed on the other end of the line, her words dripping with venom. Your dear sister is nothing but an ingrate. She refuses to pay for the damage she did to my car. But that's nothing compared to what she did to your husband. My heart stopped. What do you mean? Oh, you don't know? Her mocking tone chilled my blood. Your dear husband apparently made a move on Emily. And that's not all, they even kissed. The world around me began to spin. My husband, Mark, the man I'd loved for over 10 years, who had practically watched my sister grow up. No, it was impossible. You're lying. I managed to articulate, my throat tight. Ask her yourself, my aunt retorted before hanging up, leaving me alone with my doubts and fears. The days that followed were a whirlwind of confusion and anguish. I tried to reach Emily dozens of times, but she didn't answer my calls. Her messages, when she deigned to respond, were cold and accusatory. The only tangible evidence she sent me was a screenshot of a conversation between her and Mark. But something was off. The words, the way of expressing. It wasn't him. I knew my husband, I knew how he wrote. This conversation seemed fabricated. Mark, for his part, denied everything outright. His eyes, usually so warm, were now filled with pain and incomprehension. I don't understand why she's doing this, he told me, his voice broken. Emily is like a little sister to me. I could never. I wanted to believe him. My heart screamed at me to trust him. But doubt, like an insidious poison, was seeping into my mind. Our house, once a haven of peace, had become a silent battlefield. The unspoken words weighed heavily in the air, as palpable as the dust dancing in the sunbeams. Every dark corner seemed to harbor a secret, every mirror reflected our tense faces and evasive gazes. The nights were the worst. Lying next to Mark, I listened to his steady breathing, wondering if I was sleeping beside a liar, a traitor. Sometimes I'd wake up with a start, convinced I'd heard Emily's laughter echoing in our room. But it was just the wind whistling through the branches of the old oak tree outside our window, its shadows dancing on the walls like mocking ghosts. The rest of the family was quick to take sides. My brothers and some cousins sided with us, refusing to believe Emily's accusations. She's always been unstable, my older brother, John, would say. With everything she's been through with her ex, it's no wonder she's losing it. But his words, meant to reassure me, only added to my unease. Emily had indeed been through hell. Her ex-partner, the father of her child, had abused her for years. How many times had we begged her to leave him? How many times had we come to her rescue, tending to her physical and emotional wounds? I still remember that night when she arrived at our house, her little boy asleep in her arms, her face bruised and her eyes red from crying. Mark had welcomed her without question, preparing a bed for her on the couch and watching over her all night. That was the man I knew, the one who protected my family as if it were his own. So why? Why would Emily do such a thing? Days passed, turning into weeks. Emily's silence was deafening. She had blocked me on all social media, cutting all ties between us. Every time I passed a photo of her in our living room, her frozen smile seemed to mock me. Who was this woman in the picture really? My beloved sister or a stranger capable of destroying my life? It was on a particularly stifling evening that things took a turn. The air was heavy, charged with electricity, as if a storm was threatening to break at any moment. Mark and I were sitting on the terrace, sipping a glass of wine in heavy silence. Suddenly, his phone vibrated. I saw him stiffen, his fingers tightening on the glass. Who is it? I asked, my voice trembling. He hesitated for a moment before answering. It's Emily. My heart clenched. What does she want? Mark took a deep breath. She wants to meet me. Alone. The world seemed to stop spinning. The prospect of knowing them together, away from my gaze, awakened all my anxieties. You can't go, I whispered. I have to, he replied softly. It might be our only chance to understand what's going on, to end this nightmare. I wanted to scream, to beg him to stay, but the words remained stuck in my throat. I watched him leave, his silhouette disappearing into the night, taking with it the last shreds of my trust. The hours that followed were the longest of my life. Sitting in our living room, I stared at the clock, each tick-tock resonating like a hammer blow in my skull. The shadows seemed to come alive around me, twisting and stretching as if to engulf me. When Mark finally returned, his face was pale, his eyes red. Without a word, he collapsed on the couch next to me. So? I asked, my voice barely audible. He took my hand in his touch almost burning my skin. It's not what you think, he began. Emily, she's sick. Really sick. The words then poured out like a torrent. Emily had been suffering from mental disorders for years, exacerbated by the abuse she had endured. She had stopped her treatment, convinced she no longer needed it. The hallucinations had begun shortly after. In her mind, warped by illness, she had fabricated this story of advances and kisses. She was crying, Mark whispered. She didn't understand why we were all angry with her. In her reality, she thought she was protecting us by revealing the truth. The relief I should have felt was tinged with deep sadness. My little sister, the one I had sworn to protect, was lost in the meanders of her own mind. It was at that moment that my phone rang. The call came from the hospital. Emily had had a crisis, she had been admitted to psychiatry. The days that followed were a whirlwind of hospital visits, discussions with doctors, and long sleepless nights. Little by little, the truth emerged. Emily had stopped her treatment months ago, convinced she was getting better. Her ex-partner had taken advantage of this to come back into her life, manipulating her fragile mind. It was he who had created these fake messages, fueling Emily's paranoia and isolating her further from her family. Sitting in this hospital corridor, I think back to my grandmother's words. Family secrets. They're not always what you think. Sometimes, the real secret is the silent suffering of those we love, those invisible wounds that eat away at the soul. The door to Emily's room opens softly. Mark comes out, his eyes shining with unshed tears. He sits down next to me, taking my hand in his. She's awake, he whispers. She's asking to see you. I take a deep breath, preparing myself to face my sister, to piece together our broken family. As I enter the room, I see Emily, so small and fragile in that big hospital bed. Our eyes meet, and in hers, I see a glimmer of recognition, remorse, but also hope. I'm sorry, she whispers, her voice barely audible. I approach her, taking her hand in mine. I'm sorry too. Sorry I didn't see how much you were suffering. Tears flow freely down our cheeks as we embrace, years of misunderstandings and pain melting away in that embrace. I know the road to healing will be long and difficult, but for the first time in weeks, I feel a glimmer of hope. As I leave the room, I find Mark waiting for me. Without a word, he takes me in his arms, and I let myself go against him, drawing strength and comfort from his embrace. Together, we have weathered this storm, and together, we will help Emily find her way back. Family secrets are like shadows, yes. But even in the deepest darkness, sometimes all it takes is a small flame of love and understanding to dispel them. And it's this flame that we will strive to keep burning, no matter what. As we leave the hospital, hand in hand, I realize that the trials we've just been through have transformed us. We are stronger, more united, but also more aware of the fragility of the bonds that unite us. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson from this story, the importance of communicating, listening, and never taking for granted the love of those around us. The sun sets over the city, bathing everything in a golden glow. A new chapter of our lives begins, imbued with forgiveness, understanding, and renewed love. And as we head home, I make a silent promise to always seek the truth in the shadows, to never abandon those I love, and to keep my heart open, whatever storms may lie ahead. The weeks following Emily's hospitalization were a whirlwind of emotions and challenges. Each day brought its share of progress and setbacks, like the waves of a tumultuous ocean. I spent hours by her side, holding her hand as the doctors adjusted her treatment, trying to find the right balance to stabilize her mental state. One particularly difficult afternoon, as I was leaving the hospital, exhaustion weighing on my shoulders like a lead cloak, I came face to face with Emily's ex-partner. His face, which I had once considered attractive, now seemed twisted by malevolence. Our eyes met, and for a moment, I felt a cold rage rise within me. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice trembling with contained anger. He had the audacity to smile, a cruel smirk that chilled my blood. "I have the right to see the mother of my child, don't I?" I took a step towards him, my fists clenched at my sides. "You have no rights. Not after what you did to her." His smile faded, replaced by an expression of defiance. "You can't stop me from seeing her. She'll always come back to me." These words were the last straw. Without thinking, I slapped him with all my might, the sound of the slap echoing in the silent hospital corridor. He stepped back, shocked, bringing his hand to his reddened cheek. "If you come near her again," I hissed, "I swear you'll regret it." I turned on my heel and walked away, my heart pounding, my steps echoing on the cold tile floor. It wasn't until I was in my car that I finally let the tears flow, overwhelmed by a mixture of anger, fear, and relief. This confrontation was a turning point. It made me realize how much Emily needed our protection, our unconditional love to heal and rebuild herself. I redoubled my efforts to surround her, involving the whole family in her healing process. Mark, in particular, showed unwavering support. He spent hours talking with Emily, helping her untangle the truth from the false in her memories, rebuilding her confidence in herself and others. I often observed them interact, my heart swelling with gratitude and love for this man who, despite the unjust accusations, had never ceased to consider my sister as a full member of our family. Little by little, Emily began to find her footing. Her eyes regained their sparkle, her laughter once again echoed in the hospital corridors. The day she was allowed to go home was both joyous and anxiety-inducing. We all knew that the real challenge was just beginning. We had decided that Emily would come to live with us for a while, until she got back on her feet completely. The evening of her return, as we were all sitting around the dinner table, I was struck by the fragility of our newfound happiness. Emily was playing distractedly with her food, her son was babbling happily in his high chair, and Mark was looking at us all with a mixture of tenderness and concern. "I don't know how to thank you," Emily suddenly murmured, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled. "After everything I've done." I put my hand on hers, squeezing it gently. "You're my sister, Emily. We're family. We're going through this together." Mark nodded, adding with a warm smile, "And we'll always be here for you, no matter what." Emily's eyes filled with tears, but for the first time in a long time, they were tears of joy and gratitude. "I promise to do my best," she said in a trembling voice. "To heal, to be a better mother, a better sister." "We know you will," I replied. "And we'll be there every step of the way." This evening marked the beginning of a new chapter for our family. The days that followed were not always easy. There were moments of doubt, panic attacks, sleepless nights spent reassuring Emily or calming her son. But there were also moments of pure joy, Emily's first real laugh in months, her son taking his first steps in our living room, evenings spent watching old movies as a family, cuddled up together on the couch. One evening, as I was tidying up the kitchen after dinner, I overheard a conversation between Mark and Emily in the garden. Hidden behind the window curtain, I observed them, sitting side by side on the swing. "I'm so sorry, Mark," Emily was saying, her voice barely audible. "For everything I said, everything I did." Mark shook his head, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to apologize, Emily. You were sick, you needed help. The important thing is that now, you're getting better." Emily nodded, wiping away a tear. "How could you forgive me so easily?" Mark's soft laughter resonated in the evening air. "Because you're my wife's sister. Because I watched you grow up. And because I know who you really are, deep down. That lost and frightened person who said all those things, that wasn't the real Emily." Their words, imbued with raw honesty and deep fraternal love, made me realize how much we had all grown through this ordeal. We were stronger, more united, but also more aware of our vulnerability and the importance of taking care of each other. Months passed, and little by little, our life regained a semblance of normalcy. Emily found a job, started therapy, and eventually moved into a small apartment not far from us. Her son was growing up, becoming a joyful and lively little boy, adored by his uncle and aunt. 1 year to the day after that terrible accusation that had nearly destroyed our family, we all gathered for a picnic in the park. Sitting on a blanket, watching Mark play ball with our nephew, Emily laughing out loud at a joke from our brother, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. I thought back to my grandmother's words about family secrets. Yes, they could be like shadows that lengthen at twilight. But I had learned that the light of love, understanding, and forgiveness could dispel even the darkest shadows. Our family had weathered a storm, but we had come out stronger, more united. And as the sun began to set, bathing the park in a golden glow, I knew with certainty that whatever the future held for us, we would face it together, bound by ties stronger than ever.